Good morning. Good morning, and how are you today? I hope everybody is having a lovely day. If you want a tip, a life tip, what's up, Nathalia? How are you? Good to see you. Good morning. What's up, Nub? Good morning, Karen. Or if anyone, it's not morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever's going on where you're at. Good day. You guys want a tip? You know how you can really prevent a hangover? Have an emergency right before you go to bed. Last night was my fiance's holiday party for her work. And I went. It was free drinks and food all night. I partook and woke up feeling pretty good because I didn't have had an emergency right before I went to sleep. I had some water, and I also had an emergency right before I went to bed, and that made all the difference in the world. Slow News Day says, have a Runcible Spoon in your town, instant hangover cure. Shout out to Runcible Spoon. That's a restaurant in Bloomington, Indiana. It's more than a restaurant. It's also kind of a hang. It's a really special place. I went to college out there, and so did Slow News Day. Let's see here. Speaker noms have just been made. Did they vote on PayGo? That's the biggest question. Did they vote on that yet? So the last thing I saw, it has not been cast as of now. Skip Grumpus says, should have stuck to cannabis. I agree. Shouldn't you always? But I didn't last night. That wasn't free, but drinks were. And they made some damn good old fashions. So they're confirming Nancy Pelosi as speaker right now. That's not really anything newsworthy. We knew that was going to happen. And I don't want to watch the video because I'm sure all of us don't feel like throwing up today. So we're not going to watch that. But are they going to be voting on PayGo soon? I think it's probably not going to be until later today. But we'll see. And we are over 30. Boom! Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. I am Ron Placone, your host. And we're already over 30. This went quick. Awesome. Good to see everybody. Happy day. I was giving some life tips before the show officially started. If you want to prevent a hangover, have an emergency right before you go to bed. That's the way to do it. Have an emergency right before you go to bed. There's a lot of breaking stuff today, so we're going to get into as much of it as we can, as well as some other stuff. And first of all, I got a story to tell you guys, and I want to ask you guys if you've ever had a similar experience. So let me set the scene. It was Christmas Day, just a little over a week ago, and I was at an IHOP. So here's how my fiance and I ended up there. No offense to IHOP. I'm personally not a big fan. It's not really an institution I patronize often. But we had our big 7-fish meal on Christmas Eve, and a lot of the food got eaten. It was awesome. We distributed the leftovers. And then Christmas Day, we woke up and we realized that we weren't going anywhere until dinner time. And we had no food in our house. All of the food we had been getting was for that meal. So we just had no food in our house. And we realized, wow, we don't have any food and we're not going to eat until tonight. We should eat. So we tried to figure out what was open. There wasn't a whole lot, but the IHOP down the street was in fact open. So we said, well, we know where we're going. and I decided I'm going to get some chocolate pancakes. So anyway, we go to IHOP, and I wear this hat that's for an old political initiative, and it was a gift to me, and I just kind of liked the hat. And it was a gift from somebody whose political astuteness I trust completely, so I never question what the hat was actually for. It was just like one of those old vintage hats. But I eventually realized, I was like, you should find out what this initiative was, though, because if it's something bad, you shouldn't be wearing this hat. I just never questioned it, because it was from someone whose political leanings I trusted completely and I knew I was aligned with. So I just never. Now it turns out it was an ocean cleanup initiative. So it was a good environmental thing that I would have been for. But anyway, I have this hat and I still wear it, especially now that I know it's a thing that I would for sure be for. And I like the way the hat looks on me, and it was a gift. So anyway, I have this hat on and I'm there, and this guy goes, "Hey, what's your hat mean?" We're just waiting for our tables, so we're all kind of like standing outside. And I go, I'm actually not exactly sure what the initiative is. I'm pretty sure it's an environmental thing, but this was a gift to me, and I like the hat, so I should probably make sure it's a good thing. But so I said, but it's an environmental thing. And he goes, "Well, then I'm for it. Anything environment, I'm for it." And I was like, "That's awesome, dude. That's awesome that you're for it." And he's like, "I'm a huge environmentalist." And I said, "Good for you, man. That's awesome. I like to think I am too." Meaning, politically, I am totally an environmentalist. I just haven't really done as much activism as other environmentalists have. So I don't know if that's a badge I can pin on myself. But I was like, "That's awesome, dude." He's like, "Yeah, I'm a huge environmentalist." And then he goes, then he looks around, right? Like he looks around like he's going to do something bad. And he looks around and then he goes, "I'll tell you, I voted for Trump." Which right away was a little weird. Right? That's like being like, "I am a hardcore vegan. By the way, I shoot zebras for fun." You know what I mean? Like that was a weird spin to go from "I'm a huge environmentalist" to "by the way, I voted for Trump." Thought that was a little different. But, it was Christmas Day. I was like, "All right, man, I don't know what brought you there, but, that's your choice. It's a holiday. I'm not here to judge anybody." And he goes, "Look, dude, I'm just really disenfranchised by everything." The way he said it, he said, "Look, man, I've followed Republicans, or I've been a Republican and I've been a Democrat." That's this guy speaking. And he said, "And I think it's pretty much good cop, bad cop. And neither party's been great for the environment." That is true. I mean, that is technically true. And, he was just going on and on about it, about how he's just disenfranchised to the system in general. Now, while I share that frustration, the solution that Trump is going to be the outsider that fixes it is quite the fairy tale. The idea that this plutocrat who has benefited from the system his entire life through no work of his own is somehow going to change that system is nothing short of delusional. So, we all know this. This is all stuff we talk about all the time. So I was like, "Well, man, I agree with you on some of those things, but I don't see how you think that, that Trump would be a solution at all." And he's like, "Well, I don't really like Trump. I just blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Okay." So then somehow airports come up and we start talking about LAX, because he's talking about the environment. He's talking about how everything is just so, we're not consuming responsibly. We need to get off of fossil fuels. All those things Trump's big on. All the things you always hear Trump talking about. But he was talking about all those things. And environmentally, this guy was right on. I don't know why he doesn't join the Green Party. Some of you guys are pointing out, why doesn't he join the Greens or the DSA? Great question. I didn't get to talk to him that in-depthly, nor did I really want to. It was Christmas Day. But But he's going on about the airports. So here's my big here's sort of like where I'm wondering if I kind of nudged him a little bit. Nudge in a good way, in a positive way. So we're talking about the airports, and he's talking about how LAX is just so insane, which it is, and he's talking about how we could spread that traffic around. People would make the effort to go to Ontario or go to Burbank or go to Long Beach to kind of spread it out a little bit. Which is true. And I said, well, the reason it's such a mess, one of the reasons it's such a mess is because we've completely deregulated the airlines. We've let them operate without any type of protections for consumers whatsoever. That's why they've been able to price gouge. That's why they've been able to do what they've been doing. And that's why they're all at LAX. They just want to go where they can make the most money. And the citizens don't have a say. And he's like, exactly, man. I'm like, yeah, it's all because of deregulation. And he's like, exactly. You're exactly right. And then I go, imagine if we could vote on this. What if we could vote on the way that the airlines had to distribute their services? What if we could vote on that, man? Do you think that would make things a lot better? And he's like, yeah, that would be awesome. See, this is what I'm talking about, bro. That's the kind of change we need. We need to vote on it in our own communities. And that's not left or right. That's what he said. And then I said to him, I'm like, sir, you brought it up, but because you did, I gotta tell you, actually, that's a very left-wing idea. What I just threw at you, that you said you're all about, that's a very left-wing idea. I was like, I'm converting you. I'm converting you. That's a really progressive thing, what I just said. And you said you were all about it, my friend. And then he's like, well, I guess there's some crossover, and he shook my hand. So I don't know. I just so my question for the day is, I wanted to share that story with you guys. I thought it was a fun one, and also I'm curious. Has anybody ever had any one of those moments where you break it down on a community level, and then all of a sudden you're just like, you slide something in there, you slide it in there, and they're like, exactly, and you're like, that's actually a really progressive thing you just said you were all about. So I don't know. I mean, hey, maybe that guy freaking went home and started looking into what a Green New Deal's all about. I don't know. I have no idea. Has anyone ever had anything like that? He went home and told his wife that he met a very polite commie. I think his wife was with him. I'm pretty sure. I mean, there was a woman with him that was definitely his partner. I don't know if they were married or not. I have no idea. But yeah, his romantic partner was with him. Ronnie, be good. Thanks, Nub. That's very kind. Pam asks a question. Who fears Pence more than Trump? I do. I think Pence would be a lot worse than Trump. Absolutely. Just because Pence is competent. Let's see here. I have tricked family members into doing that, then told them it was Karl Marx. That's the thing to do. I mean, that's the fun thing to do. You kind of just, you just break it down, and then when people are like, yeah, that's awesome, you're like, hey, this is actually the thing that you were told you're supposed to be afraid of. You know? Human says, my neighbors fought with guns over Trump. No deaths yet. Jeesh. All right, that's kind of scary. You may need to find new neighbors if they're if it's coming down to guns. What's up, Alan? So let's see. And I guess Washington just voted for sensible gun reform. Some of you guys are saying I have not heard about that, but please feel free to get your. Please feel free to tweet it. We'll try to fit it in there. But first, let's go to something breaking. And Matthew gives a shout. I love slipping in a seize the means of production into family discussions. I think discussion's what you meant to type there. Yeah, you did. All right. So right now, Nancy Pelosi's being sworn in as Speaker as we speak. As we speak. And but this is also happening. So here is the most recent update I was able to find as us logging in on the stream as far as where PayGo is. Ocasio-Cortez and Khanna will vote against the House Democratic rules over PayGo spending restraints. So it looks like as of 10:44 Eastern Time today, there hasn't been much update. Leading progressives are threatening to reject a rules package backed by Democratic leadership over a requirement that they believe could thwart their most ambitious policy plans. Ocasio-Cortez and Khanna said they're going to vote against PayGo. Progressives who support programs like Medicare for All and other policies likely to increase government expenditures. I don't think they need the who there. I think all they need, progressives support programs like Medicare for All and other policies likely to increase government expenditures, worry that the rule would create a self-imposed obstacle with limited political upside. Because it would. I do not understand why the Democrats don't have the courage of our convictions and make the case that our policies will lead to growth, Khanna said, arguing that the rule was ultimately a self-defeating political calculation. Well, Ro, I think the answer to that is a lot of your colleagues don't want those policies. I think that's the answer to that. And it sucks that that's the case, but that's the case. And when you're one of the good guys, you get kneecapped. That's how the party works. All right. Ocasio-Cortez said on Wednesday she would vote against it. Bernie Sanders weighed in. I'm concerned that the concept of PayGo will make it harder for Congress to address the many crises facing our working families. And the backlash to PayGo is not limited to the party's aggressive progressive. Oh, interesting. Interesting use of phrase here. The backlash to PayGo is not limited to the party's aggressive progressive bloc. Ohio Rep. Tim Ryan, a leading Pelosi rival, said in a statement that the rule would handcuff the new majority and is a no-go for me. Here's what Ryan has to say. Tim Ryan, we all believe we need to ultimately bring our budget into balance, but these investments are too important right now to pass up and will yield significant returns for the U.S. Treasury. All right. So as of right before I logged into here meaning the stream, that was the most recent thing I found in regards to what's going on with PayGo, specifically in the now, happening right now. So it's sounding like the progressives are not going to have the votes to stop this. That's what it's sounding like. They need 18 of them. It doesn't look like they got 18 of them. So far, we know they have 2. There's 2 that we know of. Ro Khanna, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If all of the progressives voted, they would be able to stop it, or voted against PayGo, rather. They would be able to stop it, but I don't think all of them are going to. I believe Jay Appel said she wouldn't be. But we'll see. As of right now, the vote hasn't happened. This is breaking. We will probably be off stream before the vote happens. If we're not, somebody tweet it to me immediately. And I will be checking Twitter. Let's see if anybody has. Because, yeah, I would want to know immediately if they cast the vote while we're live on the stream. And I guess Jay Appel is also going to have, will be trying to introduce legislation shortly to repeal PayGo. Which is very weird. I'm going to vote for something and then introduce legislation to repeal it immediately. Although I guess we're not 100% clear where she's voting, it looks like. I mean, people are saying she's likely voting for it, but I don't know if that's 100% definitive yet. Yeah, I think that's all we got so far as far as an update goes. All right. Well, we can't do anything more on that right now. We're just playing the waiting game. And, as Tom Petty said, the waiting is the hardest part. Here's something over at Common Dreams. They failed us once again, House Democrats denounced for dashing hopes of a Green New Deal. This committee is weaker than the first Climate Select Committee from a decade ago, and it does not get us meaningfully closer to solving the climate crisis or fixing our broken economy. No subpoena power, no rule barring members from accepting fossil fuel money, no directive to craft the kind of visionary plan that science says is necessary. Democratic leaders had an opportunity to embrace young people's energy and back the Green New Deal, but they failed us once again. This committee is toothless and weaker than the first Climate Select Committee from a decade ago, and it does not get us meaningfully closer to solving the climate crisis or fixing our broken economy. So basically, there was a call for a committee. Nancy Pelosi brought in her own version of the committee, and here is what this article is saying is what her committee consists of. The mandate for Nancy Pelosi's Climate Select Committee is out, and it's everything we fear. This is from the Sunrise Movement on Twitter. No mandate to create a plan on the timeline mandated by top scientists. No language on economic and racial justice or a just transition. But what does the one thing it does do? It does allow members to accept fossil fuel money. And the new Climate Committee will be officially established today if House Democrats vote to approve their newly unveiled rules package, which includes PayGo. And once again, as of the recording of this, that vote has not happened yet. So we're still waiting for the vote. Hang on. Check this out. You ready for this? We're waiting for the vote. Will we get PayGo or will the progressives say no? The shutdown's been going on for a long time. Wait, hang on. The shutdown's been going on for a long time. We're just waiting for progressives to get in line. We're waiting for the vote. We're waiting for the vote. We're waiting for the vote. Please say no to PayGo. 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 And YouTube, that is parody, by the way. That is technically parody. Parody on the spot. I was making that up as I went along. So we're waiting for the vote. But the Climate Committee that's proposed now by the establishment is as weak as we could expect it to be. All right. So here's a little bit of media news, and this is interesting. This kind of hit, I think this has been around for a little bit. Let me check the date on this. Well, this article is actually from today, but this has been kind of circling around the blogosphere, I think, for about a day or so. But I wanted to talk about it today. Veteran NBC commentator rips failures pro-war posture of corporate media in scathing resignation letter. So, basically, this guy left MSNBC. Why? Because it's so pro-war. Let's hear what he has to say. In a biting resignation letter published in full by CNN on Wednesday, longtime NBC News reporter, commentator, and military analysis Bill Arkin blasted the corporate media network for embracing U.S. national security leaders and generals while ignoring the empirical truth of what they have wrought. There is not one country, well, I think that's a typo. It says county. I think they probably mean country. There is not one country in the Middle East that is safer today than it was 18 years ago. Indeed, the world becomes ever more polarized and dangerous. Reflecting on his past couple of decades working with the network, in addition to writing books and columns for major newspapers and serving as a military advisor to human rights and environmental groups, Arkin laments, "My expertise, though seeming to be all the more central to the challenges and dangers we face, also seems to be less valued at the moment. And I find myself completely out of sync with the network, being neither a day-to-day reporter nor interested in the Trump circus." Noting in his 2,228-word memo that the world and the state of journalism are in tandem crisis, Arkin delivers a scathing critique of how NBC has responded to the foreign policy of Donald Trump, whom he calls an ignorant and incompetent imposter, asserting that in many ways NBC just began emulating the national security state itself, busy and profitable. No wars won, but the ball is kept in play. However, Arkin also delivers a broader condemnation of the network's coverage of the so-called War on Terror in the nearly 18 years since 9/11, and how it has helped produce a scenario in which perpetual war has become accepted as a given in our lives. He writes, "Seeking refuge in its political horse race roots, NBC and others, meanwhile, report the story of war as one of Rumsfeld versus the generals, as Wolfowitz versus Shinsky, as the CIA versus Cheney, as the bad torturers versus the more refined, about the number of troops and number of deaths, and even then Obama versus the Congress. Poor Obama couldn't close Guantanamo to reduce nuclear weapons or stand up to Putin because it was just so difficult. We have contributed to turning the world national security into this sort of political story. I find it disheartening that we do not report the failures of the generals and national security leaders. I find it shocking that we essentially condone continued American bombing in the Middle East and now Africa through our ho-hum reporting." Alright, so let's look at a little more of his letter. "For me, I realized how out of step I was when I looked at Trump's various bumbling intuitions, his desire to improve relations with Russia, to denuclearize North Korea, to get out of the Middle East, to question why we are fighting in Africa, even in his attacks on the intelligence community and the FBI. Of course, he is an ignorant and incompetent imposter, and yet I'm alarmed at how quick NBC is to mechanically argue the contrary, to be in favor of policies that just spell more conflict and more war. Really? We shouldn't get out of Syria? We shouldn't go for the bold move of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula? Even on Russia, though we should be concerned about the brittleness of our democracy that is so vulnerable to manipulation, do we really yearn for the Cold War? And don't even get me started with the FBI. What? We now lionize this historically destructive institution?" So an MSNBC employee was tired of how pro-war the network is, tired of how tribal they are, tired of their inability to let critical thinking guide their decision-making. Why? Because their owners wouldn't want that. My one question to this guy would be, did you not know who your employer was when you got hired? MSNBC is currently owned by Comcast. Before being owned by Comcast, they were owned by General Electric. General Electric made their money in bombs, among other things. As a result, MSNBC never saw a war they didn't like. They have championed every war in my lifetime, and probably this gentleman's as well. The people who got the Iraq war right, they fired. The people who got it wrong, they promoted. If you say anything out of step with their corporate narrative, which is funded by oil and gas companies, weapons makers, and Comcast, they will fire you. That is why you see segments where Rachel Maddow, a Rhodes Scholar, pretends like she doesn't understand net neutrality. She does, but if she gives an honest report on it, she will be fired because her employer, Comcast, hates net neutrality. They want net neutrality to go away because they can screw over consumers more if it does. And it amazes me that every day we wake up and there's just not a huge headline. Hey, United States, your media is owned by a small handful of corporations that have no business. They have nothing to do with news and information. Comcast has nothing to do with news and information. Jeff Zucker has nothing to do with news and information. Rupert Murdoch and his empire has nothing to do with news and information. But they're big corporations. They have deep pockets. We let them control our media. It's amazing. Why do we passively accept this? What if it was a different corporation? What if it was McDonald's? Hey, we're getting into the news business. McDonald's getting into the news business. You know, whenever they report crime, you see the Hamburglar and they're like, hey, we're going to report some crime. Don't forget to buy our product. Here's our criminal. He likes burgers. Grimace gives you the weather. You're reading the news, you're like, oh, I see no problem with McDonald's getting in the news and information business. I'm sure this article about how a Big Mac, if you eat a Big Mac every day, it increases your penis size, is totally science. It also gives you instant abs. This is science. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with this study. Why is it any different? If McDonald's wanted to get into news, they were like, yeah, we're going to be a major cable news. We're going to own a cable news network now. I think people would sort of be like, oh, that's not appropriate. Why is Comcast any different? They're not. They're not. Why is the Murdoch empire any different? It's not. And whenever people in this country go, Ron, are you calling for, would you rather the media be run by the state? Yes! Yes, I would. Are you kidding me? Yes. The BBC is not perfect. The CBC is not perfect. I'm not going to try to say they are. But to have funds allocated for an overseen state-run entity for news and information, would that be better than what we have? Yes! Because at least there's some accountability. Would corruption still happen? Yes, of course it would. Would it be perfect? No. Would it be light years better than what we have? Yes! Are you kidding? Yes! We're better off just letting corporations do whatever the hell they want? That's news and information. That's not the media structure we've always had in this country, by the way. We used to arguably have the most regulated media structure in the history of democracy. It could be argued. Why? Because we had different newspapers that were all founded by schools of political thought. Socialists, constitutionalists, federalists, they all had their own newspapers. And how was the government involved? They distributed them. Because it was distributed via the post office, the government would subsidize it because it was news and information. So if you had a newspaper, you could get involved with the press, but you had to come at it from a school of thought. And sure, there was some yellow journalism out there, but there was also many different rounded perspectives. In an average metropolitan area, had about 10 different newspapers. Something like that, where you had a set-aside governmental agency that funded different newspapers from different schools of thought, would be infinitely better than what we have now. Infinitely better. And here's a guy that wants to report honestly on War and Peace, and he realizes he can no longer do that with his employer. He was probably never able to. And I guess it's just seeing the current state of affairs that pushed him to his breaking point. Well, I guess we'll see what this guy does next. I don't know if he's going to go to another network, because I don't see it being any better anywhere else. This is from David. Amazon sent 1,700 Alexa voice recordings to the wrong user following a data request. That's not a great look. 1,700. Okay. So what happened here? Amazon's Alexa is among the most ubiquitous personal voice assistants on the planet, and it also happens to live inside the living rooms and bedrooms of millions of Alexa device owners around the world. That gives Amazon the responsibility of being a proper steward of the data it collects when we ask Alexa a question or engage in back and forth conversations with the software. Unfortunately, a case from Germany has highlighted the potential pitfalls involved with using such a product. When Amazon accidentally sent a man 1,700 Alexa voice recordings of another user by mistake. Oh man. Following the passage of the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, any EU resident may demand a copy sent to them entirely of the data collected about them through both internet services and hardware products like an Alexa-equipped Echo smart speaker. One German user, under the alias Martin Schneider, did just that in August of this year. What he got back from Amazon, however, were thousands of Alexa voice recordings, which was strange considering he didn't own an Alexa device. Upon listening to the file, Schneider discovered they were recordings of another Alexa user. After failing to get in contact with Amazon about this issue, the man brought the files to CT, I guess that's a media outlet, where reporters were able to piece together who the Alexa user was. Wow. So there's a Data Protection Act over in Europe that says if you want to see what they're collecting on you, you can, and they have to send it to you. A guy expressed this right, exercised his right, and Amazon sent him the wrong stuff on a different user, a totally innocent person, and then that was taken to a news agency because they needed to determine who this person was. This person, well, I mean, the one bright side for this person is hopefully if they play this right, they will never have to worry about money another day in their life. They should receive a settlement from Amazon. I don't know if they're going to, but you hope that they get a settlement from Amazon that they never have to worry about money another day in their life. This is a gross breach of privacy. This is a gross breach of terms of service. This guy should be able, or I don't know who it is, guy, girl, what, I don't know. This entity should be able to sue Amazon. And they should get, I'd imagine they'll just offer a settlement, and I would say the settlement should be a number to the point where this person should never have to worry about money another day in their lives. It should be in the millions. And I wish that for this person. Imagine that. Like somebody sent all of your recordings that's been collected because you have an Alexa device. It's been collected. And they just send it to a random person. And then it gets distributed. Because they need to determine who the hell is this person? Who is this person? What's going on? This is not what I asked for. How do we get to the bottom of this? Because Amazon's not helping. Wow. That is something. David, thanks for sharing that. That is something, and wow. I hope both those people get huge settlements from Amazon. Both of them. All right, we got a little bit of net neutrality and municipal broadband news. We're going to go to that next. Then we got one more story, and that's how we're going to end it. Because our last story of the day, I want to get your guys' take on. So here's something. Minnesota counties help fund cooperative broadband projects for economic development. So this is what we touched on yesterday, where you have local municipalities that are able to start building a co-op if their town government isn't getting on board. So even if a local government isn't ready or able to build its own broadband network, there are still ways they can help bring the benefits or better connectivity to their community. Over the past few years, several counties in Minnesota have partnered with local electric and telephone cooperatives to expand high-quality internet access as an economic development strategy. In many instances, county governments have offered financial support to the local co-ops in the forms of grants and loans to connect their rural residents with high-quality fiber networks, often supplementing federal subsidies or statewide Minnesota border-to-border broadband development grants. And here's a list of different projects across the state. So the reason I bring this up, another way to bring muni broadband to your community is through a co-op if you are seeing resistance from your local government, as I've been dealing with. Now, let's bring it back to net neutrality. And here is what's going on with net neutrality in 2019. All right. These are the 2019 court fights that will decide the future of net neutrality. The battle for over net neutrality is far from over. Although the Federal Communications Commissions last year officially nixed the Obama-era rules. Okay. So we know what happened. This is just a summary of what happened. So we got net neutrality on the books officially in 2015. We've had net neutrality assumed since the advent of the internet. When people give the Obama administration credit for net neutrality, I find it very frustrating. There have been digital rights activists that have been fighting tooth and nail for net neutrality and to get it solidified as law since about 2004 and beyond. It actually goes as far back as 96 in some cases. So this is nothing new. Net neutrality has been assumed rules of the internet. The cable companies took it to court in 2014. They won, but the court said if you make the internet a public utility, designated as a Title II, which means it's a utility, then you can impose net neutrality rules on the internet, net neutrality protections. Tom Wheeler of the FCC, and this is the Obama administration, didn't want to do that. Why? Because he had a history as a cable lobbyist. But the public screamed, and they screamed, and they kept screaming, and they twisted his arm into doing it at the 11th hour. That's what happened. So to say that Barack Obama somehow is responsible for net neutrality, or that it's his idea, or that he somehow championed it, he really didn't do that. Did he do the right thing and express his support for it at the 11th hour? Yes, he did, to his credit. But to say that net neutrality began with him is completely false, and it's misleading, and it helps opponents of net neutrality, because then they're going to spread the falsity like, well, we've only had net neutrality since 2015. I remember the internet being fine in 2012 and 2013, and we don't need net neutrality. That's very misleading and false. So anyway, that's why that sort of verbiage frustrates me. All right, so getting back to the article, what's going on in the courts right now? All right, supporters of net neutrality have taken the FCC to court to overturn its repeal decision. That case goes into oral arguments in early February. On Wednesday, which is yesterday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for D.C. Circuit revealed the names of the 3 judges who will be deciding the case: Judith Rogers, Patricia Millett, and Stephen F. Williams. Of the 3, Williams is a familiar face, appointed to the court by Ronald Reagan. Williams serves on the 3-judge panel that heard the case that were challenged on net neutrality when the Obama-era rules were challenged by broadband companies. In 2016, he was the only judge who dissented, although that was only part of the ruling to the decision that upheld the regulations. The 2 other judges for the February hearing are both Democratic appointees. Rogers was nominated by Bill Clinton and Millett by Barack Obama. Millett has argued forcefully for reproductive rights and has been called a worthy successor to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Rogers is considered a politically moderate judge who is meticulous in her knowledge of the way federal agencies properly make decisions, which will be the key issue facing the court when groups such as Mozilla face off against the FCC on February 1st. Rogers' understated style and manner are not likely to give way to the courtroom, which argument she finds more compelling, but persuading her is likely the key to victory. Okay. So it seems like for 2 of them, it's sort of, we can guess where they're going to go. One's going to be in favor of net neutrality. One's going to be against net neutrality. So this moderate judge is going to be the decider. So here's an update on what happened in California. So this is in regards to California's state law. The D.C. Circuit's decision is expected to set the tone for other court fights over net neutrality, in particular the Trump administration's legal efforts to block the state of California from enforcing its own net neutrality legislation. The state law, which is regarded as the strongest in the nation because it prohibits some ISP activities since was passed last year, but moments after it was signed by Governor Jerry Brown, the Justice Department announced it would sue the state. A month later, the two sides agreed to a truce. The legislation still took effect on January 1st. California is not enforcing the law, and the Justice Department is suspending its litigation until the D.C. Circuit case is resolved. So basically, we don't have net neutrality, but it's more or less on hold because the ISPs can't really do anything because this law is looming and a lawsuit is looming. So that's why, even though technically we don't have net neutrality, no one's really felt the effects of it yet because we're fighting it in court. And that's the status, particularly in California. So February, that's when we're going to hear about this. There's 3 judges involved. And again, let me give you the name of that moderate judge again. Judge Rogers. That's likely going to be the decided. Judith W. Rogers. Judith W. Rogers. I'll say it one more time. Judith W. Rogers. So I encourage everybody to reach out, contact Judith W. Rogers, and encourage her to support net neutrality. And let's see. And here you go. The most effective way you can contact is to call. And there you go. 202-216-7260. This is straight from the DC Circuit website. So this is the office number. The most effective thing you can do is call and leave a voicemail. They have to listen to it. Well, not them specifically. It'll be a staffer, but it has to be listened to and recorded. It's the most effective way to do it. Emails, better chance it could get lost. Phone calls are still the most effective way, even in the year of our Lord 2019. So there you have it, 202-216-7260. Judith W. Rogers will likely be the judge that casts the deciding vote on the future of net neutrality. All right, our last thing for today, and then I'm going to go to you guys, because I want to talk about this one. Arizona teachers who talk politics will be fired if a new bill passes. Oh, man. A state lawmaker wants to send teachers a message. If they bring politics into the classroom, they're risking their jobs. So this is House Bill 2002. And it would direct the State Board of Educators to divide a code of ethics for educators that would include provisions forbidding the spread of political and religious messages in public district and charter schools. So what's in the legislation? The bill will require a new code of ethics that includes several specific provisions. So teachers can endorse, support, or oppose any candidate or elected appointed official. This I'm okay with. This I'm fine. I mean, the classroom is not a place to campaign for somebody when you're a teacher and they are your students. But this gets a little murky. I mean, this one piece I'm fine with. I would have assumed this was a rule already in the instance of public education. All right, introducing controversial issues, quote unquote, in class not related to the course being taught. The bill defines controversial issues as political platform issues, which include topics like immigration, abortion, guns, and even taxes. Okay, how do you determine it's not related to the course being taught? You know, I mean, obviously, a lot of political platform issues make sense in science. It makes sense in literature. It makes sense in history. It makes sense in economics. which can bleed over into math. So how do you eliminate certain courses over others? All right. Endorsing, supporting, or engaging in activity hampering or impeding a military recruiter's access to a school. Now, that's interesting that you're not allowed to talk about political issues, but you better let the military in. I don't think a military recruiter should be allowed to go to a school. I think if people want to join the military, they should do so on their own accord, and they should, encounter recruiters in a public space, or they should go there themselves because they're interested, going to the military office themselves. Endorsing, supporting, or engaging in activity hampering or impeding law enforcement activity. What does that even mean? Endorsing, supporting, or engaging in hampering or impeding law enforcement activity. Advocating for one side of a controversial issue. The code will require teachers to provide students with material educating them on both sides of the issue, teaching in a nonpartisan way. Well, okay, but what if you're asked your opinion? Are you allowed to tell them how you feel as a citizen? Segregating students according to race, or blaming one race of students as being responsible for... Oh, okay, well that's... Yeah, okay, that's... I'm surprised you're not already not allowed to do that. I didn't... Were you still allowed to do that in Arizona prior to this? I mean, I don't know, but I would assume this was outlawed a long time ago. So some of these things I'm obviously very okay with. Some of these things I think create a slippery slope. I'm all about teachers not being able to segregate students. I'm also all about teachers not being allowed to endorse candidates in the classroom. It's just not an appropriate forum for it. Some of these others, there's a little bit of muddy water. Introducing controversial issues, how do you determine that? I mean, that gets a little murky. Endorsing or engaging activity. The military recruiter thing, I don't think military recruiters should be going to high schools. And then the law enforcement, what does that mean? What if a cop comes into the classroom and you're not supposed to hinder what they're allowed to say? If they're a cop, they can just say whatever they want in your classroom. They can just trespass in your classroom. Or what if you engage in a protest against police brutality on your own time? Could that hurt your job? Could you lose your job? Because it doesn't say that this is limited to the classroom in this specific verbiage right here. So, if you want people to teach in a nonpartisan way, well, okay, that's fine. But what if they go to a protest against police brutality? Are teachers not allowed to do that? What if they don't think... what if they're against the way the military recruits in schools? They have no say in that? So, I want to see what you guys are saying about this. What do you guys think? I mean, some of the things in this legislation, I don't see how anyone could be against that. But some of it, I don't know. Seems kind of slippery slopey, right? Seems a little slippery slopey. Let's see. Hey, Platypus, how are you? Thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. It's Platypus and a good intro from me, Ron. I had heaps of those moments from people watching my videos I've been putting up as What Do You Mean? Glad to hear it, Platypus. Thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. Big Baby Zubas, thanks, dude. You're very welcome. And thank you for the Super Chat contribution. Let's see here. Let's see. Garden Gnome, I agree. No recruiting in schools. Chris Sean says this country is done. That blaming thing is to stop teachers from saying things about the past. Yeah, I mean, how do you determine? Like, obviously, if you're teaching history, there should be no contemporary issue that's off limits because that pertains to what you're being taught. You know, I understand if you're, if you're teaching a class and it's just like like you're teaching whatever, you're teaching algebra. I'm just pulling this out of my butt. You're teaching algebra and you spend 30 minutes in class advocating for who you're going to vote for president. I can see how, hey, that's not appropriate for this forum. That's not appropriate for you, for a number of reasons. It's a teacher-student dichotomy. A student, maybe they don't agree with you, and maybe they feel a little uncomfortable now because they're like, gee, if I don't, maybe they're old enough to vote already, and they're like, gee, if I don't vote for this candidate, my teacher might take it out on me. I mean, I get that. I understand that. But to avoid controversial issues, if it's not, I mean, that's so vague. And Pam Ryan recommends everyone should read Chomsky's Miseducation treatise. I agree. Daniel finds it very weird. Garden Gnome says all these points are so subjective in their application that they are basically arbitrary and will be enforced at the whim of the administrators. It's a very good point. Jeremy says it seems to be taking a shot at unions. I didn't think about it from that angle. Interesting. Goldilocks also echoes that. It seems like they're trying to get around the teacher strikes. Interesting. Alan says it seems unconstitutional. Daniel says, would it blow minds if I told you that during my junior and senior year of high school, in 2007 and 2008, in my U.S. government and history class, we would watch reruns of The Apprentice on Wednesday? Oh, boy. Oh, boy. And people say vague blanket laws are never a good idea. I agree. And Pam Ryan says historical revisionism is worse than ever now. I believe it. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. All of the things that, like, as you get older, you realize all of the ways you were mistaught on certain issues. I know for me, I grew up in Pittsburgh, where Andrew Carnegie pretty much funds everything. And let me see here. And they would do these school assemblies where they would talk about what a great person Andrew Carnegie was. And really, he wasn't. He exploited a lot of different people. He caused an actual battle. And the reason he gave all his money away when he was going to die was because he had more money than he knew what to do with, that he got from unethical ways. And he was worried he was going to go to hell when he died. So he just gave a bunch of stuff away because he was worried he was going to go to hell when he died. And we were taught what a great guy he was in school. Like, we were taught there was this guy who did a reenactment of Andrew Carnegie, and he talked about how the reason Andrew Carnegie got where he was because he read books, and it was like, it was a message for literacy, which is a good thing, but the choice of historical figure was a bit questionable, to say the very least. Anyway, we are totally out of time. Little bit of housekeeping. Guys, if you can support this show on the sustainability end, please do consider becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. For give what you can level, you get all kinds of content, and you help build this show. I want to do an upgrade of equipment. I want to get better lights, better microphones. I want to be able to help out the people that help me out. So please, if you are so able, help me build Get Your News On with Ron and its staff, etc., etc. Show dates coming up. We're confirming more East Coast dates. In the meantime, Florida, get your tickets. I'm going to be in Florida next week. Gainesville, Orlando, Coral Gables, Jacksonville. Get your tickets now, ronplacone.com. Get your tickets for March, New Orleans area, Lafayette, Louisiana, Pensacola, Florida. April, we're coming to Texas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. Tickets will be available soon, Austin, but we are confirmed ronplacone.com. You guys are amazing. Thank you very much for an amazing week back. We'll be back on Monday. It will be a short week because I'm going to be on the road some, but we will be back on Monday for Music Monday, our first official Music Monday of 2019. The podcast comes out tomorrow. You guys know that. Podcast comes out tomorrow. And you can get the Get Your News On With Ron podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. You guys are awesome. Thank you for a great week. I will see you on Monday.